Live. Today I have the pleasure of Brendon Prince. Apologies, Brendon. My eyes are not. They're with me this morning.
It's a
Good
common
morning to see
mistake.
you. Yes, good to see you, Brendon.
Likewise, good to see you. I was called Brian Pringle the other day, so
Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
Brendon Price was not a bad mistake.
Yeah, apologies for that. You are a teacher and lifeguard with over 25 years of experience and have championed water safety education ever since witnessing 3 souls drown on the North Cornwall beach. You took on an incredible endurance challenge to stand up paddleboard the entire coast of mainland Britain, called the Long Paddle, and through that you set 5 world records. You sort of paddled around 2,500 miles and took you over 140 days. Pretty incredible and amazing, and well done to that. That's just pretty awesome to do. Question I want to ask, really, because I think it's a huge challenge, and people take on these challenges not just for the fun of it. There's always something deep-seated, and there's something of a why, because to be honest, without that, I don't know how you can keep going for that long anyway. So why did you take this on? What was the point of it?
Hey, how are you doing, Julian? Yeah, your why is so important. And for everybody, it's completely different, and it's finding your why is why you do these things. You know, the thought, if I said to most people, right, you're going to have 141 days off work and you're just going to paddle every day, people will be like, that sounds like an absolute joy. It's very different when you've got to go in the same direction and every day. And every mile you do is one less mile. So every mile you don't do, no one's going to do for you. So you've got to have an amazing, the motivation has to be deep. It has to be really deep. For me, it's all about water safety. I've seen too many people drown in front of me, handing bodies back to parents. There's only so many times you can do that without thinking, actually, I'm going to give up my life here and devote it to trying to stop this. Because, you know, the clues in the name is accidental drowning, which means it can be prevented. So whatever I can do to do that. And it got to the stage where I was having a voice, but not the voice I wanted. And then all of a sudden you do something which creates world records, paddling around the UK. Something that people have tried, no one's ever achieved. You know, it's a bit death-defying, and you know all the lights and everything that's involved with that. And all of a sudden, people want to talk to you. So, 4 years almost later, you're wanting to talk to me, and I get requests weekly. So, and all that I've done since, more paddling, everything that's out on the water, just to promote good practice, and that's my why, and that's why. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when you're putting a wet wetsuit back on and it's minging and monging and you're hungry and tired, you get up and paddle for 16 hours, because otherwise you'd go, I'm just going to roll over and go back to sleep.
Well, that's incredible, actually. And as you say, you need a deep-seated why to do those things when you're tired, wet, hungry, fed up, bored, all the various things that you must have gone through. And I know, obviously, you're into paddleboarding. What was the thought behind just going big, of going around the Great Britain? I mean, that's quite a challenge. I mean, a lot of people do things like little charity runs or for raise money or raise awareness, but you went absolutely massive. And I don't know, I wonder where that thought came from.
Well, do you know what? To a 21st century, you've got to do something big, otherwise no one's going to listen. And that's the sum of it. And, you know, there's a... you know, work out the irony in this, that obviously I'm a water safety advocate, promoter, and yet I was doing something that almost every day I was risking my life. So where's the balance in that out at water? So trying to demonstrate that good practice, the fact that if you've got the skills, you've got the experience, you've got the equipment, you know what you're doing, the plan and the preparation, all of those aspects are covered. It's amazing what you can achieve when you push yourself. And there were times when, yeah, I really did push myself, but that is the point of trying to prove what could be done. And then, of course, going big, going around the UK, really floated those people's boats, literally. So gained lots of interest ever since. And it's, you know, my life went from being a teacher, 25 years of teaching, to giving up teaching. And now my life is a very, very different day to day. Because it's all about being on the water and paddling and promoting now, it seems, because I'm one of the only people who have ever kind of seen every single beach in the whole of the UK. I do loads of destination development stuff, helping resorts, beach resorts, understand where they fit in amongst the thousands of beach resorts we've got in the UK. And that means I get a greater voice for promoting and making sure that these beach resorts have provision for water safety, drowning prevention measures, etc. So my life is going in the direction that I wanted it to go, and try to steer it in. But what a way to get there.
Yeah, what a way. And I know this challenge, we say it quite glibly, you did it 140 days, 2,500 miles. But I coached a team of ladies who were looking to row around Great Britain. And I know the challenges of not personally being involved in terms of being in the boats, but what they experienced of tides and weather and all those sort of an exhaustion and trying to work through that. So it's a tough challenge. And I just want to understand, before you set off on your first paddle, what were the fears that were sort of the challenge, but also how did you overcome them to try and keep going?
I think the fears, like in life, really, you know that something might be happening later in your week that you're not looking forward to. And how do you overcome that? For me, paddling, I knew that, let's say, it might be a particular headland that I would have to get around, go through the Menai Straits, going around some of the aspects of the north west coast of Scotland, where there are 4 or 5 days where you can't get out, you can't go and get help. When you know those things are coming, how do you mentally prepare yourself for those? And that's I'm not a big fan of the term resilience, which I'm sure I'll explain later, but that's where you have to just get on with it. That's your choice. I put myself in the position to just get on with it. So there's so much you need to do for the mind to overcome and to prepare yourself for that. I mean, paddling around, starting in Torbay, South Coast, was a great way of turning right when I got out of Torbay, which meant I wasn't, in theory, the gnarliest bits are the north coast of Cornwall, through to the west coast of Wales, through to the west coast of Scotland, the north coast of Scotland. So I was doing those bits, and even though I thought I was the dogs as far as experience, you've got to build that experience up, because no matter of training, no matter how good you think you are, there's always a wave and a headland and a gnarly outcrop which will bring you down to size. So you've got to keep your wits about you every day, and that was physically. People say, "Oh, it must be so draining." After a month or so, your body was used to it, and you just gone on with it, averaging 10, 11 hours a day. The tough bit was the mental strain, because the decision making, 10,000 decisions you make almost every hour, it seems, when the weather's coming in and you have to get to a tidal gate before the wind, waves, tides change, doing all those things. The mental strain is a hard bit. That what really takes it out of you.
And how did you deal with that mental strain, that constant trying to second guess, navigate, think ahead, in the moment, all that type of thing? There's a lot going on there, isn't there?
There's a lot going on. And having a smile on your face. Having a smile on your face is your first line of defense, personally. Forgetting everybody else, because I'm out there on my own. It's the first line of defense. If you think, actually, I need to go left on this bit, and I need to miss this headland I might be paddling 10k out to sea to get around tidal flows and issues, or what happens on land with the weather is very different to what happens in that first 5 or 10k of the coast, which is very different again to what happens 30, 40k. So you have to pick your moments. And often you pick those moments, you've planned, you've prepared, you're ready for it, you've paddled for 6 hours to be in that position, and then it all changes on you. And it's all changing on you, and the shit has just hit the fan. But what can you do other than resort to your own experience and crack on? And having a smile on your face is the first line of defense, of not giving into it. You're in that position. What are you going to do? Curl up in a ball and just, no, you're going to crack on, and you're going to delve deep to that experience and that knowledge and your physical prowess to actually get yourself through the situation. So, without going into greater depth on that, I think everybody has to have a first line of defense. And for me, smiling like a fool, perhaps out at sea on my own, some people might look at it, but it is that reality check to yourself. And it's all against the battle, because we've all got those inner demons, and you've always got that inner demon that's going, give up, go home, go and have an extra hour's sleep, go and get some food. You'll always have that chipping away at you. So first line of defense, and then you've got many, many layers behind that to make sure that never comes into your psyche and never wins you.
And you're talking here physically smiling to yourself. So while you're paddling on your own, you are physically just putting a smile on your face. I'd be interested to understand, where did you sort of learn that about you, that you got to that place where you knew that was your first line of defense in a situation that's quite tough?
Do you know what? We've all got life experiences, and teacher for 25 years, you can solve any situation.
That sounds tougher than going around 114 days of paddleboard to
exactly.
me.
What that teaches you about yourself and other humans, in any situation. And yes, I am the type of person that asks for forgiveness rather than permission. But a smile diffuses any situation. And if you've got problem kids with real issues in a real situation, you go in there with a smile on your face, and and that's a genuine smile. It's not a put on smile, a genuine smile to say, look, we can sort this out. We're all here together. That can dissolve any issue with any situation. So you bring it into yourself. And the same in business. What I do now as a self-employed person, and there are issues and hurdles and things come in, but you start with a smile, which brings everybody down to go, right, let's work this through. Let's work it out, because there's no point in not, because all that's going to do is get backs up and egos and issues. So for me, it's a big part. And I can give you many examples where the shit properly hit the fan when you're miles out at sea on your own. And I find myself chuckling to myself, because it's like, right, okay, let's do this. Let's get through it. There's no turning back. There's no, you have to go through this, and you can see it happening. It might be 10-foot standing waves. It might be you've got to go out, get out to the beach to get onto the water, and it might be 12-foot waves. How are you going to do it? How are you going to get through it? It's going to be a battle. It's going to hurt. And at points you're going to think, what the hell am I doing? But you keep that smile on your face.
Wow, that's incredible. It's incredible. You mentioned about resilience. I'd like to understand what your view is on resilience. I mean, I talk a lot about resilience and do a lot of work with teams on resilience, and I've got a view on it, but I'd like to get your perspective based on your experience as well. What you see as resilience?
That's a huge question, and so I think interpretations are all personal. So this is my personal take on it, but we didn't have the term resilience 5 years ago, really 10 years ago. We definitely didn't have it, and why is that? So for me, a child, let's say a child going home after school, knowing she or he's going to get beaten up by dad that night, that's resilience. An adult looking after their parent who has dementia and all, that's resilience. Going business, trying to make money or solve problems, or being an adventurer going around headlands and so, that's not really resilience. For me, that's a case of 5-10 years ago, get on with it. You've planned, you've strategically planned what you're doing, you've managed the risks, you've got the resources, so get on with it. And so it's that understanding what resilience is. And people say, how did you show resilience every day? And it's a case, for me, it was a case of, well, I started something that I planned and had the vision and the goal setting was all there. So if the moment I took that first step forward, or in my case, the first paddle stroke, you're in that channel, 5x5, you are in that channel. So just get on with it. Put a smile on your face, pull your boots up, get on with it. And resilience can often be something where people have to fall back on to then, which actually, if you're in the moment and you're living the moment, whether it be gnarly waves or whatever, you can't fall back on anything. Every second counts, every millisecond counts. So you've got to know that your strength of your why, of that vision and setting, why you're in that channel, is what gets you through. And I do lots of talks and speak in rooms of business people who are striving for that resilience, and break it down. If you've got your why and you've planned and you've prepared, where does the resilience come in? It's a tricky balance, and it's often because it needs to come in because you haven't done one of those other elements how you should have done. If you've got all those boxes ticked before you get to that problem situation, you can get through it. If you've missed one of those things out, if your planning's not been good, if your leadership's not been, then you're going to need to fall back on what we call now resilience, because it's all the shit's hitting the fan.
Yeah, I like that perspective on resilience, and I agree. I think that the why piece, I talk a lot about knowing your why, and that's why I asked you that what the driver for you was. Your why, your purpose, whatever you want to call it, is the almost the bedrock, the anchor to navigate all these challenges, whatever it may be. Because as much as we might plan, there's always been stuff that we're not aware of. Whether you talk COVID, Ukraine war, there's a whole host of stuff we've had from a global perspective, but even from a personal perspective, we get things, and it's that sort of ability, isn't it, to, like you would have done daily sort of problem solving as you were paddling. You were constantly, as you say, looking at the sort of waves, looking at the channels, looking at weather, and constantly navigating and sort of almost scenario planning what they'll do next. That's that sort of working through, isn't it? How you sort of work through life as well.
Yeah, very much so. And life is simpler when you don't have surprises, isn't it? But actually, surprises can help you get through the day too, because they focus the mind. So, on the board, I would do as much planning and preparation to reduce those surprises as possible. But also in your head, then working out, well, what are the real surprises here? Being hit by an Atlantic rogue wave, that's a real surprise. It may never happen. Bumping into orcas, a real surprise, may never happen. But you plan and prepare for these things so that when they happen, you kind of think to yourself, well, that's a 1 in a million chance that a rogue wave that wild, that large will come rushing through. But you kind of knew it was coming because it could happen to you any day. And I think in all walks of life, it's understanding that surprises are to be kind of grabbed with two hands, because actually what they can then lead on to is a direction that you never in your wildest dreams or nightmares could have thought that's the direction you're going into. And if you can grab it and ride it, then all of a sudden that opens up those channels that are different. For me, bumping into orcas in the middle of the night in Scotland, changed my perspective on life forever. I didn't know that bumping into something which made you feel so unbelievably helpless that anything now pales into insignificance on it. So if I get the worst situation happening to me, I've had what I call now my orca moment. So it puts it in perspective. We've all got in our own lives those orca moments that actually, if you keep it there, focus it, can help you to get through other situations which will never be as big as an orca moment, life on earth is precious. Make the most of every day. I've lost my father, for example, lost my father. That puts things in perspective, and we've all got those moments that we can use to move forward. And often it's a case of people forget about those things, which is coming to terms with whatever they are, that really bad situation that happened at work, but, use it and abuse it to move forward,
Talk me through that orca moment. That sounds quite a pivotal moment, not just on the paddle, but also in your life.
Yeah, I mean, these things happen when you least expect them. And for me, I was paddling the north coast of Scotland. It was June, so it gets dark from about midnight to 3 a.m, so you can paddle real late. So it was about 10 o'clock. And that time of night, the massive cliffs that are full of birds were all quiet because they go to sleep at about 6, 7 o'clock. So that cacophony of noise that is bird life all dies off. And I loved that because it was quiet. And what I mean a cacophony, it was there, you would be so loud, and you'd have that all day long. So to have that quiet moment, and it was still and calm, and all of a sudden this boat in the middle, I am 10 hours. I've been 10 hours. I've got another 2 or 4 hours. And there's no way of getting out. So to see human life is, don't expect it. And this boat came up behind me, and it was such a surprise that I kind of turned on the board to look. And what I thought was a boat channeling through the water was an orca. Wow. And in that moment of stepping back with such surprise, and the bow wave from this, it's like a VW minibus plowing through the water. That's the size of this thing. It was such a shock. I actually stepped off the board, which was one of only 14 times I fell off the board in the whole of the circumnavigate. And I'm in the water next to an orca that is the size of a VW minibus. And it just cruised past my board. And, its eye is above the water. And I've never had another creature on planet Earth look at me like that creature looked at me. Because it probably thought, what the hell is this human doing out here? And why did he just fall off? Anyway, it cruised past. And in that moment of thinking, I'm still alive, and I'm crawling back onto my board, another one just came up behind me. And they do, because at that moment, there is nothing I could have done to save myself. If I was on its menu that night, that would have been me. That would have been the end of me. Lots of people say there's no orcas have ever killed a human. Let's face it, if that thing had chewed on me that night, there'd be nothing left of me. I would have just disappeared. And it would have been a report that Brendon Prince, doing circumnavigate, has disappeared. He was eaten by an orca. So all those things go through your mind. But yeah, that was my orca moment, because it cut away any ego, self-reliance that I've got, because I could have been eaten, in my opinion. So there I was in the middle of nowhere. I've just had this situation. I climb back on the board. There's no one to speak to. There's no one to laugh about it or get through it. You've got then 4 hours of paddling before you get off the water. And I bumped into them twice more that night. And the second occasion, it was literally a mum that brought some calves. And I honestly think brought them up to just show, right, this is a human. Look at a human. This is what they look, because she properly showed them, and then off they went. But after the third time, it was like, actually, they're hunting you until they realize that you're a human. Or they're practicing hunting you. So get off the water. I don't want to be mistaken here, but they are life-defining moments. I call it my orca moment. And anything that happens in life, I can always go, well, hey, put a smile face, because it ain't as bad as an orca moment. I never got eaten.
Wow, what an amazing experience! And as you say, the third time, it probably felt like they were eyeing you up, ready to take you off and eat you up. How did you process that? And because obviously sometimes processing things, it's helpful when you share, isn't it, with other people? That's a good way of processing it. How did you, in the moment, process all that? And were you processing? Did you have a chance to process, or did you just carried on with your paddling?
Yeah, so I played mind games all day long. If I'm averaging 10, 11 hours on the board, you have to keep the mind busy. And I was really strict with that. So being able to then put time aside in my strict daily routine of what I was doing in my head was really important. So that gave me material for weeks there. Focusing on an hour a day, really gave me how I could use that moving forward. But also, yeah, it's really difficult, because when you're doing these type of activities, you necessarily haven't got someone to just go and speak to about it. And my team, so I had 2 people with me, as far as they're both driving vans. One was just looking at if he could meet me somewhere and have a meal prepared. That just was brilliant. And then the other one was trying to just get wherever he could to video and film, and because we were making a film. So it might be days between seeing these guys. I might see them for a whole day if I'm off the water and there's, a storm or such. But they were brilliant because they didn't put up with any shit. So I would come off the water after 16 hours and feel like death, or I've just bumped into orcas, or just got through the biggest waves of my life, or whatever it might be. And I'd go to kind of tell them, and they'd kind of, especially one, Will, who's very black and white, would say, I just stop you there a second, Brendon. What time are we on the water, so I know in the morning what's your planning? So we're already at that moment and in the next one. And sometimes when you're doing this type of thing, it's not good to dwell on too much. And sometimes to have that person within your team who focus, keep going, keep moving forward. I'm not saying that should always be done, because sometimes you need to be able to speak. But when you're doing something like this, where actually you got 4 hours sleep and then you're on it again, don't waste an hour chatting about it. Let's just get your head down and get on with it. And that's then where the strength of understanding in your mind that the next day. And I would play, so I would have in a 10-hour routine, an hour of playing music, an hour of thinking about blessings and what's good in life and what's happy, an hour of processing, right, what am I doing later? And so I was structured, and the watch would beep every hour to know, right, stop thinking about that now, that's that, put that aside, move on to the next box. And by the time I finished 140 days of paddling, 10 hours like that, 10 hours of just doing the same thing would go, and that's why it took me the best part of 6 months to wind down from it. Because if you've got on average 10 hours a day to yourself, and all of a sudden you're into life where you know what life is like now, if you're lucky to get a minute to yourself with everything that goes on, that's really tricky to suddenly, you need that time. So it took me the best part of 6 months to really defocus and refocus then on day-to-day life.
My goodness. So you created this structure. Was that before you started paddling, or was this as you started to paddle, you realized you needed to do this 1 hour sort of segments of different types of thinking and blessings and processing, or did you go into the whole sort of challenge with that already in place?
I reckon about half of it was in place before I started, because training paddle, they're really tough, because where's your motivation on a training 10-hour paddle? Whereas once you started your adventure, that your motivation is there. But 2 weeks beforehand, when you've got to go and do a 10-hour training paddle, and it's shitty and it's horrible, that's a real example of where your motivation comes in, because you're only letting yourself down if you don't go and do that training paddle. You're only going to pay the price later if you don't do that training paddle. So I was finding myself, if I just listen to the music for 4 hours, you've defocused after the hour, and then your mind wanders, and your mind is a dangerous thing. Left to its own devices in those situations, your mind will, a bit like water, will always find the easiest route. So don't allow it. So channel that water, move that flow in the direction you want it to go in your mind. And I was finding that an hour was what I needed to move on to the next thing. So a training paddle for 10 hours, I was starting to think, well, actually, this is really working for me. So I'll see how that comes in once I start, because I needed that flexibility once I'd started. I didn't know that it was actually 10 hours, 15 minutes a day was my average paddling day. I didn't know that would be the case. So that's where I was in the process of 4 to 5 hours. I knew what I would be doing up here.
And I'm sure there were some challenges and some really sort of dark moments. I don't know if you want to share any moments when it was really, really tough, or you felt things you're going to give up, or it just was not going to work. and almost what got you out of that? What pulled you out of that situation just to carry on or maneuver through that sort of dark moments?
Yeah, yeah, of course there are dark moments, and there are different types of dark moments, aren't they? And no one is any less powerful than the other. So on a dramatic scale, out at sea, in standing waves, you know, I was paddling across the Firth of Forth on a day which was bad. You know, there aren't many humans that would paddle on a day like that. But if you don't paddle, it's not going to get done. So there's that fine line of knowing what you can do. And there was a situation underneath the big wind turbines, 5-10K out, where the turbines are constructed, it's often on shallower water. So that can draw the deeper water in, create standing waves. It can be a really gnarly situation. I was in one of those standing waves, locked in because the power of it, spring tide, and I lost my paddle. You know, that's disastrous. You're 12, 13K off the coast. You've lost your paddle. So where'd you go there and then? The smile on your face gives you that moment of clarity rather than panicking, because you're in that moment is where your critical thinking really makes a difference. And just to use that moment in a panic situation, you've lost that moment. So the smile on your face gives you that time to think, how am I going to do it? I've got a faith, so of course I'm looking upward. But let's face it, unless a miracle comes and, you know, a bolt of lightning comes and sorts the situation out, which is unrealistic, you only got yourself to get yourself out of the problem. And it's having that supreme confidence in yourself. And you only build that confidence through clarity of having a trajectory of experience and understanding that. And often we can be on that trajectory, but because we haven't reached the end of it yet, we don't think we're good enough. We're actually, you're so high on that trajectory, you're flipping amazing. And for me, paddling wise, you know, I'm good. I'm still learning every day. I'm still striving to be a better paddler. But I'm good enough to get through these situations. And it's knowing that and understanding that. And I think with people, they often don't realize that actually they have the skills and experience to deal with the situation. And it sometimes is often easier to look to somebody else to step in and help when you've got that ability yourself. But understanding your own experience is a really tough skill to, and out there on your own, you've got no one else. You know, you can look around to your heart's content. There's no one else gonna step in and save you. And because I'm a water safety advocate, at no point, let's face it, was I going to ring the RNLI and say, could you come and help me? Because that would have been the ultimate failure. No, that's why I put everything in place to know that I can deal with these situations. And that confidence, you know, in that situation and in many situations where there were issues, it's understanding your own ability. So you actually just go with the flow. There were times when I gave up the paddling of wanting to go there because the world, i.e. the tides, the flow, the weather was pushing me there. So just let it happen. And there were times when I was 35K off the coast, you know, because a storm had pushed me, and I went with it. Didn't fight it, went with it. I just knew that, you know, it would be another 10, 20 hours before I'll come in. But I've got the provisions, I've got everything I need with me. I'm warm, I've got the kit, I've got the experience, and I've got the confidence to smile, and just it takes you in a different direction. You're still going to get where you need to get. It might be 2 days later than you planned, but you're still going to get there.
Now, people are probably thinking right now, listen to you, what happened to that paddle? How did you get out of that situation? Because that's what came, because you said it, and I thought, okay, and I love how you navigate those challenges and work them through. That's brilliant. And I love the smile come back into it as well. So what happened in that situation when you actually lost your paddle?
So a standing wave, for those that don't know, where the water flows through at such a rate, it goes over a bump somewhere, and it can create then a stand, and the wave just stands perfectly still. So it's not moving in any way. And it might only last 2 or 3 minutes. You know, there were some standing waves off the coast of the Mersey, Liverpool, which were amazing. And I've always planned to go back there, but they only lasted about 10, 20 minutes. So there's these things that happen. And if you're stuck in there, the gravity holds you in, and the force of the water coming through means you can't get out. So you can try and get along it. In that situation, what happened was I went down into the standing wave. My paddle hit my board and sprung up, and that's when I lost it. It actually hit me in the mouth, and I actually broke my jaw, just above top teeth. At the time, it just felt like someone punched me in the face, and was sore for the next couple of months. And then it wasn't until I finished and went to the dentist, and they went, "Oh, you're going to lose all your front teeth because you've smashed it and broken it." And that was 20 visits to the dentist later. I got all that sorted. But back in that moment, I'm lying on my board, and it's all hell's breaking loose. And a skill that you need when you paddleboard is, if you lose your paddle, to be able to prone paddle, which is on your knees. Now, as a lifeguard, I do that all the time. So I was just about to do that. And as I put my arms in to literally guide myself along this standing wave, I put because my paddle was locked in the standing wave, just bouncing along as well, put my hand straight on it. So I was back on my feet, using a paddle to steer out of it. And a bit like just catching a wave, then you go along it until the standing wave isn't anymore, and suddenly you're out of it. You know, I would have loved to, and I often relive that moment in a Hollywood style, as though it's been videoed, because, you know, for me, that was like hell on earth. But you get through it with a smile on your face, and you live to tell the story and learn aspects from it.
Yeah, and it's those stories, you know, your orca moments, that story in itself, and you must have many of those, that allows us to face situations and say, well, I've done this before, or I've got through worse than this before. It enables you to sort of go forward, doesn't it, and push through in situations where you may face, and I'm sure you're facing things all the time, as we all are. So having that almost history of awareness of our evidence of that we've overcome in other situations really builds our confidence and our ability to go forward. Now, you spent, 10 hours a day on the board on your own, 140 days, did a lot of thinking, a lot of processing, a lot of all sorts of things going on, I'm sure. What did you learn about yourself in this challenge? What are your sort of takeouts when you reflect on those sort of 140 days about who Brendon is?
Do you know, that's one of the kind of deepest questions you can ask, isn't it? I think you sort a lot of shit. One way I describe it is like we're a river, and like any river that flows, all sorts of debris get caught up, and occasionally you'd need a proper big flow to clear it through. And the long paddle for me did that. It cleared out. It helped me to overcome the death of my father. So understanding grieving, it really helped with that situation. But also it helped with, I was going to the transition where I was 48 years of age. I'd been a teacher for 25 years. So was I going to continue being a teacher, try and be the best teacher I could for the next 20 years? Or was I going to do something else for 20 years? And understanding there was a process in life where every single day makes a difference. I learned that on the paddle, because for me, paddling, every single day made a difference. There's one example on the northeast coast, just by Blackpool, where there were northerly winds for about 5 days. And it was day one of those 5 days, and 25, 30 miles an hour, which is, the limit really for paddling is about 20 miles an hour into the wind. So anyway, I started paddling. The northeast coast, Blackpool, it's all concrete, as in it's all sea defences. And I start paddling, and I'm into the wind. And it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and this guy was walking his dog along the promenade. And you could see him look, because he was going 5 times faster than I was, because I'm into this wind. And he's looking down at me, and you could see him chuckling to himself, going, "What is that fool doing?" Anyway, he walked on, I'm paddling. And then it was about 6:15 that evening. I'm still paddling. And out walked this man with his dog. and he was only about a mile and a half further on from where he saw me in the morning. And you could see him think, has that guy been doing that all day long? And I'd only got on a mile and a half in 9 hours. Do you know what? That meant that I'd got it done, and I never had to do that mile and a half again. And that taught me so much about myself, because sometimes what you've got presented in front of you can seem such a large wall to climb. But unless you actually start doing something, put something in place to make that climb, no one's going to do it for you. You know, you've got to do it. And sometimes it's lovely just to be able to leap over that wall. But often you've got to take one step at a time up that rung to be able to clear it. And that taught me to deal with any situation that, you know, sometimes you can run and jump that wall, and other times you just got to take those little steps. And sometimes it's 5 steps back before you take that 1 step forward. But yeah, that understanding in our daily life, and I don't think it gets any easier as you get older either. You know, I always thought that perhaps it would get easier as you get older, but if anything, it gets worse. So, you know, you got a lot more to prepare for and get through, and challenges to overcome. As being a father, being a husband, being self-employed, doing crazy challenges, you know, all these things to overcome.
That must have been so tough, because that mile and a half, you were very aware of the short distance you were traveling. Like when you're at sea and you're away from the coast a bit, you can actually lose the sense of how far you're going. But when you're quite close and you can see that apparent mile and a half, it's not a long mile and a half, your eyes can see that. And that must have been so challenging, motivational to keep pushing forward for 8-9 hours and only do that.
And by the time I did a 2 or 3, then I was on a mission to not get anywhere, because I knew I wasn't getting anywhere very fast, but actually just to do a day's paddling and get that done, because that gave me such power. Because if you can achieve these things and still feel strong and still feel just the self-confidence that I didn't give up to the weather. You know, the weather will always beat you, but sometimes you just got to show resistance and not let it get you easily, and that gives you a tremendous power moving forward.
Yeah, I talk a lot with my clients about sometimes you just got to show up and just go through the process, and that's what you were doing. You're showing up. You knew how to do a day of paddling, despite your outcomes were probably further in terms of what you'd like to have done. I don't know, 10, 12. I don't know how far you did a day average, but you only did a mile and a half. It doesn't matter. That's all it's about. Don't get caught about the outcomes or about the end goal. Just do your things you can do now, and that's really important. When you look back at the challenge, is there anything you look back and you do things slightly differently, or you think, no, I did it as I could, best I could do it? Or is there anything you'd learned thinking, actually, if I did it again, or I was going to give somebody some advice, this is what I would tell them?
You know, you can spend a lot of time wallowing in hindsight. You can spend a lot of time. So you got to be careful there, because whenever you make a decision in the moment, it's really easy to sit back and go, actually, now that I'm not in that moment, I can see that perhaps I should have done it like that. And of course, there were many situations where, with a bit of hindsight, you can think, well, if I'd spent a bit longer looking at the weather, understanding the weather, I could have envisaged that would have happened. But at the moment, I didn't. So I did plan this route when actually I should have done that route. I mean, the ultimate one is when I left Torbay, I turned right, because the prevailing conditions for the last 20 years has showed that actually, if you go around the UK in a clockwise direction, you've got the prevailing conditions. In 2021, it would have been so much easier to go around anti-clockwise, because that's on that year was the prevailing conditions. Why didn't I see that? Why didn't I work that out? You know, that's such a big thing. Who knew? So I'm very cautious about, you have to learn from your mistakes, of course. You have to learn from and spend a bit of time, but not too much time, and going back and thinking, actually, what would I have done? What would I have done differently? If I was to do the challenge again, if I was to go around the UK, I wouldn't do it on a paddleboard, because without doubt one of the most ridiculous things to try and do it on, because you succumb to everything. Whereas to do it on a kayak or to do it on a surf ski would be so much easier. So never say never. You never know if you might do something again. Because there's so much you can see. I love our coast. I love our coastal communities. I love that almost every 10K you go around the UK, there's something different to see. The language changes, the accents change, the people change, the water changes. And when you spend so much time on water, you know, you do become a bit of a ninja and understanding. And the water on the south coast of England is completely different in its structure, in the way that you move and use it, to it is on the west coast of Wales or the north coast of Scotland or the east coast of Anglia. It's completely different. So now I understand all those things. Of course, I'm coming to the table with greater knowledge that if I was to do it differently, I would do it differently. But doesn't belittle or change how I did it previously, and I'm so proud of the way I did it and what I knew back then.
Fantastic. Well, it's been great talking to you, Brendon, and I could talk probably for a lot more long with you. Just I'm quite inquisitive and curious of all what you've done and how you've done it. It's an amazing achievement, and I'm sure you're proud of yourself of doing that, but also what it does. It serves your why of getting the message out there about water safety, which is fantastic, and that's so evident. If people want to get in touch with you or connect with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, two ways. Me personally, Brendon Prince up on social medias, and it's dead easy then to find on my website, brendonprince.com. So you can find all that out. And then from the water safety aspect, so I'm the founder of a charity called Above Water. So abovewater.org is the charity website. Just to like and share on socials is really important, because you never know when the whole new audience that person shares a water safety post to. There could be that one person that sees that post and then turns left rather than going right when they're near water, that could save their life. And we'll never know if their life was saved because of that information. But by just liking and sharing stuff is such an important. But also, we do, for the charity, we do hub training sessions in schools around the whole of the UK. So if you're connected with a school and you think, do you know what, we could get Above Water in to do a training session in our school, it's all free. We invite all the other schools then to come to your school. We train young leaders. They go off into their own schools and teach the water safety, drowning prevention methods that we teach, which is all about keeping everybody water smart, everybody water safe, and reducing our 700 drownings that we have in the UK every year, which is, you know, in a first world country who is an island nation, is not acceptable. It really isn't.
Well, thank you for that. I'll put all those in the show notes so people can find the links to that and get more information about you and your charity. Thank you very much, Brendon.
Absolute pleasure, Julian. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your questions. Thank you.